All right. Well, welcome students to our February webinar. Glad that you have joined us. As you can see, I'm here with some of the most
best looking.
That's one word. Wanted pastors. I'm here with a group of Destiny pastors. We are having our annual board meeting and invited our board and as well as a few other ministry friends to join us for a session of strategic planning. We've had a great day. We've been in a meeting all day, so we're all a little delirious. We've all known each other for a very long time and are all very good friends. So tonight will be both practical and probably hilarious as well. So just hang on for the ride. As you know, though, most of the time when we do webinars, we have a single guest, and that guest tells you all the things that they're doing right, all the things they're doing well. You know, we have Pastor Jason that'll come on and tell us about relaunching a church, and he's just a rock star at that, and give us some practical tips. That's great. We'll have Pastor Brian on to talk about leadership development, and he's awesome at that, and he can give you some great tips. And go on down the row on these guys who are all incredibly qualified to teach us what to do well. But even more important, I think, than learning what to do well is learning where we've all struggled, made mistakes, and learning also, they're each going to share with us the one thing that they know now that they wish they would have known when they first started out in ministry. So many of you that are listening are emerging leaders, developing leaders, and you need to know that you're going to make mistakes, that you're going to have some weaknesses, some frailties, but those things don't define you, and that you can learn from them, that everyone, no matter where they've reached in ministry, no matter what position they're in, they all have past mistakes that they've overcome and that they've learned a lot on the way. So you are about to have some incredible wisdom downloaded into you. What took years and probably some tears for these guys to learn, they're going to be able to tell you in a 55-minute segment or so. So I hope you're taking good notes, and I believe this will probably be the most impactful webinar that you will see during your time of DLI, to have guys of this caliber willing to share with them. Also, if you hear some background noise, we do have a live audience. Cheering and jeering us on as well. So, well, great. Well, glad you're here. I hope you get you out your notebook and let's get started. We'll start with Pastor John Ragsdale.
Yeah.
Hills, Nashville, Tennessee. Pastor John, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Now you said 55 minutes. That's per person, right?
Yeah.
So I have 55 minutes now.
Yes.
Woo! 54. 54. Okay. So
if you're going to talk about your mistakes, then it probably will take.
It's going to be long. So I'm John. My wife Kristen and I. We have two boys, Evan and Davis, and we pastor a church, the Hills in Nashville, Tennessee. We're 6 years old and loving it. Incredible. We love where God has placed us. First of all, I love this topic, and I love all these guys here, and I thank y'all for being open enough to say yes to Landon. That gave me the courage to do it as well. So I am 48. So I've been in ministry full-time for 31 years. Started full-time when I was 17, which is crazy. So I've got a lot that I could go back to. But I think the one that I wish someone would have told me back then, and so hopefully this will, those of you that are young, or as Landon said, you may not be young, but you're young in ministry. I wish folks would have told me, I'll say this a couple different ways. But one is, don't be looking so far into the future where you want to go and what you want to do that you miss what is happening right now.
So good.
And what God's doing around you.
Yeah.
It's so easy to think about the hopes and the plans that God has for you then and really forget about that that's a part of what's happening right here and right now. And you really can't get there if you're skipping through what's going on right here. We just did a series, or we're in the middle of a series at our church where we talking about Jesus's the beginning of his ministry and how there's identification that happens at his baptism. This is my son. And immediately following that comes frustration, where he's led into the wilderness. And I just spent some time talking about how we always want to get out of that season of frustration so quickly. But if Jesus would have done that, he would have missed out on the fact that it's only a title until it's tested. So you have to have this moment where
Wow.
you're my son, and then that title is tested, and then when he comes out of the wilderness, then the Bible says then he was operating in the activation, the power of the Holy Spirit. And so I think many times we can try to, man, if I could just get through this. Just like those of you that have children, I tell people all the time that when you have children, it goes by so fast. Sometimes my wife and I have been married 25 years, and sometimes it feels like it's been 5 years. Sometimes it feels like it's been 50 years. But when it comes down to kids, no parent ever says, man, it went by so long.
Right.
Because it goes by so fast. And I believe that's because they're different human beings every few years. So they're a newborn, then they're an infant, then they're a toddler.
Yeah.
And every season you're like, man, if we can just get them out of diapers, you know?
Right.
And then all of a sudden, just a moment ago, our 20-year-old texted me, I'm heading back to college, Dad. And
Wow.
our 16-year-old who started driving a few days ago is driving. I'm like, where did this time go?
Yeah.
So I would encourage you in ministry and in parenting and in relationships, make sure you're not looking so far ahead, longing for what you feel like God has for you, for your destiny, that you forget that today is a part of that destiny. And tied into that, I would say, don't spend so much time looking for the people that you want to do ministry with that you're overlooking the people that God has sent you to do ministry with right now.
Wow. That's good.
And I was guilty of that when we planted our church 6 years ago, looking for, oh, we want those type of people. If we could just have these type of, and right around me was the people that God had sent me. And I would say also the fact that to remember that God said he would build his church.
Yeah. Right.
And that's very important. And so he's going to send you the people that need to be sent to you.
Great.
And so just focus on where you are right now and be the best you can be right now today with who God has sent you.
So good.
So that would be I wish I would have known that.
That's good.
I know it's a mistake.
God bless. God bless.
Yeah, I don't have many mistakes, though. That's the thing.
What do you guys, you want to jump in there? Any experience that you have that would speak to, I think it speaks to all of us. We've all been in that place of you're driven, you're called to ministry, you see the future. By nature, if you're a leader, you're a visionary, you see where God wants to take you. And then you're such in a hurry to get there that you miss the ministry along the way.
Absolutely. I think it's funny. My wife and I were talking recently. It's like you spend the first half of your life trying to act older. It's like you want to rush. Like, can't wait to, drive a car. Can't wait to get in college. Can't wait to get a job. Can't wait to get married. Then all of a sudden you get all that. And you're like, man, I wish I could go back to high school. I wish I could go back to college. Just like,
Right.
and there's a part of it that's like, just seize the season, like seize the moment. Stay where you are. Like John was saying, it's so many things in ministry. Even now, I'm not 58. Oh, 48. He said 48. But I'm catching it. And
How old are you?
38. Man. But thankfully, like there's like guys like John have been in our world to help us through seasons. And I look back now, and instead of just trying to grind and just like we're going to make it, like embrace a little bit of it. Like what John was saying, just embrace that season and enjoy it, opposed to just despising all the things you're going through. We could have gotten so much more from some seasons.
Right. If you look back at Luke chapter 9, verse 52, I'm going to give you some Bible because I'm not sure that I can trust him to do that. So, Luke chapter 9, verse 52, it says that Jesus set his face towards Jerusalem. So by the end of Luke 19, he actually gets to Jerusalem for the purpose in which he was called, which is to die for the sins of the world, to give himself up. Look at all the miracles he performed, all the people that he taught, all the people that he fed along the way to his ultimate destiny.
That's so
And so if he would have had his head down and said, my goal is Jerusalem, I'm going to get to Jerusalem, he would have missed the blind man outside of Jericho. He would have missed Zacchaeus. He would have missed the multitudes that needed his teaching. He would have missed the demoniac boy at the base of the mountain, the people that were there on the way to his ministry. He could have easily put his head down and just got there.
Right.
But his ministry wasn't just about what happened there. It was all the people and things along the way. So good, Pastor John. Thank you for sharing.
Don't give me another hand clap.
Any other guys want to contribute there, or are we ready to move on to Pastor Jared?
We want Pastor Jared.
All right.
We're all waiting for him.
Yes.
Oh, man.
So this is Pastor Jared Height. I've literally known Pastor Jared my entire life. And to go back and say with Pastor John, because really it's all about me and how I'm related to these people. Pastor John is like a big brother. Our dad's pastored in neighboring towns, so well, John's known me my whole life. And Jared's known me my whole life because he's a couple months older than I am as well. But Jared, his parents were at the hospital when I was born. So we've been friends for a long time, and so proud.
Let's hug it out.
so proud of what God's doing in his life. So Jared, tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what you know now that you wish you would have known then.
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to, I love every one of these guys. And of course, Dr. Brassfield's in the room. And man, we would never, none of us would be here without him and directing that. And so we honor you as well in that. But my name is Jared Height. I have a beautiful wife. Her name is Shuri.
And she happens to be here, by
And
the
she
way.
is right over there. And you can't see her, but you wish you could have. I have two little princesses, Avery and Eden. They're 4 and 2 years old. And it's just the best thing being a dad. And we get to serve on the side of my parents, Nelson and Pam Height in Corinth, Mississippi at Church of the Crossroads. And only church I've ever known. And so pretty biased. I love it so much. But I think one of the, probably the greatest lessons that I learned, and actually from this guy right here, was to be yourself. God has created you specifically to be you and not to be anybody else. And I think especially for us to see the authenticity of and the appreciation of how God created us, not to be self-absorbed. They created us for specific purposes. And so He's given us those talents, He's given those abilities to be able to line up with the purpose that He's created us for. And our job is just to be ourselves, let Him let's do the best and let Him do the rest. And one of the examples of that, I mean, learning that lesson, I was in Bible college back in 2005, and I was so excited because we were going to Nashville, and John and Kristen were there. And so it was the first time he's going to hear me preach a message, no pressure whatsoever. And so he's sitting in the crowd, and man, I came off the platform. Like I had my 3 points. I was pointing the finger. My voice was just and just getting excited.
Me too.
And I had everything laid out, and it was I felt like it was just the perfect landing. And I got to stay at John and Kristen's house. I was on the way back to their house, and I was like, "How did I do?" And John said, "You did a great delivery." But I want to always remind you. I don't know if you remember this conversation. Be yourself.
Yeah.
Don't have to be anybody else. And Jared, that wasn't you up there.
Wow.
Be yourself. And what I began to understand is it's okay to be me, and it's okay to be you, and find that, especially as you're searching your ministry opportunities and maybe this decision, that decision. Allow God, with the God-given ability He's given you, let Him place you in the right position and be yourself.
Oh, so good. Oh man, that's good.
And I think what's so powerful, what Pastor Jared says, that all of us come from ministry homes. All of our families were involved in ministry. And we've all had to take that journey of who are we? What's God called us to do? It's the default is just to do what we've always seen done, and then sometimes there's a tension between what we've seen done and how we feel wired and gifted and called. I'm pretty sure that there's no one out there like me, and the world's grateful that there's only one of me. So, thank you guys. And so, where do I fit? What is my place? What do you guys want to add there?
Well, I know I've already spoken, but I need to say this. I think with social media the way it is, there's comparison is just crazy.
Yeah.
So good.
And it's so easy to look at how even some of these guys, I watch how their production is and how they're marketing, and then I look at other people outside of my arena, and I go, man, that is just, well, what if we could do that? I know we can all borrow some of those things.
Right.
But, I would say, Jared, it's all come full circle now, because I look at you, and I think, I've told Kristen this, I don't think there's anybody that's doing a better job of being themselves than you are.
That's right.
And I've learned so much from you about being a father, about being a husband, just watching you and how you do it. And so I think for you to know, all of us to know that there's somebody looking at us,
Yeah.
and it may be a 5-year-old, but there's somebody looking at us saying, I want to be like them.
So
Right.
true.
I can't. I
You
can't.
Stop.
Make a rock scissors.
Good job, Ryan.
You know, Psalms 139 says, I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made.
Right, true.
And for me, growing up in a pastor's home, I had this ideal in my head of what a great pastor was supposed to be like. And so I tried to morph into being my dad or being, having his personality, but now understanding that God created me just to be me for a reason.
Right.
And instead of trying to be him, just like growing stronger in who I am and strengthen the gifts and the talents that he's placed inside of me so that I can be everything that he wanted me to be.
Right. That's so good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Because I can never be Ragsdale. I can't ever wear those shoes. I just can't do that.
Okay.
I don't remember who said it, but somebody said God can't bless an inauthentic version of yourself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like the sweet spot of ministry where God's grace and his enabling grace is when you step into who you are, into your gifts and your calling. And when you're trying to be somebody else, you're outside of that enabling grace that God has put on your life to do
That's
exactly
great.
what he called you to do. And just the more clear that I've ever gotten in my heart of who I am and what God has called me to do, the greater growth has happened in our church. Like,
Yeah.
it's just all about clarity of who I am.
Right.
So good. Yep.
I didn't feel like that was enough support.
We got you. Way to bring it strong.
I was just,
Ryan, you want to go?
I was just, in my mind, I was taking notes, that's why I didn't applaud. I was just like, that's so good.
Amen.
Pastor Ryan, and then add to that?
Well, if I talk any more about this, we're going to talk about my
Oh,
next
all
thing.
right.
So I just, you know, dancing all around here. So
Let's just,
I'm just drawing from each of them,
let's just go. So Pastor Brian,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So once again, how
tee it up for me, Brother Landon.
Pastor Brian was actually my youth pastor. So you guys have all heard the story
Oh,
about,
that's right.
yeah, you've all heard the story about the Sunday school teacher that taught Billy Graham.
Yes.
Well played. Well played. Well played.
He's teeing it up for you all.
Just strike out.
Something similar going on. Yeah. But no, I've known Pastor Brian
So brilliant.
for most of my life. Love this man, love our relationship. And Pastor Brian, tell us a little bit about what you're doing now.
Oh, absolutely.
And
I was Landon's youth pastor. No, that's my accomplishment in life. Just want to let everybody know. My name is Brian Larson, and I'm married to Ashley, the love of my life. We've together over the last couple of years have set out to fulfill a passion and dream in our heart to just come alongside of pastors and leaders and to help them fulfill their dream.
Yeah.
And it's just a passion for us to do that. And it's been such a joy. And we do not have kids, but we have a furry little rascal named Allie, and she is spoiled. And Lord, pray for our kids, because if they're anything like this dog, they will have a great life and be very spoiled. But we're happy to share. Thank you, Landon, for the invite. Thanks to these cats, all these guys up here are truly examples of iron sharpening iron. I learn from all these guys all the time. They push me to be better. And to Dr. Phil and Kathy, we love you, honor you, and glad to be here. So something I wish I had known is one thing that I talk about often in my life is you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have it all together. I wish I had known that, because some of the examples I saw early in ministry in my life painted some unrealistic pictures for me about being perfect or having it all together in ministry. There were some weaknesses I wish I could have seen as examples on how to handle weakness better that would have helped me as a pastor and leader down the road. Because inevitably, I have weaknesses and flaws in my leadership and in my life that came to surface, and I wasn't sure how to handle those. I wish I could have seen a better representation early on in my ministry experience or walk, journey, if you will. I love the scripture where Paul is writing to Timothy in 1 Timothy 1. It kind of helps set my heart free a little bit. He's writing to him, and he says, listen, Jesus came to save the worst sinners, to save all the sinners. And he said, I'm the worst, I'm the chief sinner of all of them. this is the Apostle Paul who wrote 2/3 of the New Testament. You know, like, okay, he's admitting he's got sins, he's got flaws, right? And then the next verse he says, God had mercy on me so that Jesus could use me as an example of his patience and his goodness, so that I could be an example to everybody else, that he can still use someone like me and do some great things for the kingdom of God. So for me, it was like liberating, like, oh my gosh, the Apostle Paul, like he has flaws and it's almost like he's celebrating, but not really. You know, it's like, it's okay. You got problems, I got problems. Look what God's doing through my life. And so for me, it was been a journey understanding and learning how to deal with those flaws and those imperfections. Because what I learned, if I didn't deal with mine healthy, I wasn't going to deal with other people's.
Yes,
healthy.
that's right.
So the people that I lead, I was going to respond to their weakness, their imperfections, the way I dealt with mine.
Yeah.
It's like you got to love your neighbor as you love yourself.
Yeah.
And I wasn't loving some of my leadership imperfections.
Right.
And so what I found out is when I began to lead other people, the way I handled myself was the way I was handling them. And it was so disappointing to me in my leadership. I realized the people that I loved and the people that I was wanting to lead, I was hurting them because I was hurting in my own leadership. I had a limp in my own leadership, right?
Right.
And so I think the greatest thing for me, just my personal journey, would have been to know how to handle those a little bit better, because I didn't always see good examples of that. If I did something wrong, my leaders who didn't deal with their weakness right, they didn't handle mine right. And so they made me insecure. They would get silent. They wouldn't talk to me. They would push me away, and that awkwardness would form. And I thought, well, that's how you handle it when someone does something wrong, that they don't do what's right, you know?
Right.
And I realized that's not a healthy team. It's not healthy leadership. And so for me, it's been a great journey in leadership to realize that I don't have to be perfect, that God can still use me. I can say I'm sorry. We can have grace for ourselves, grace for others, and create healthy leadership.
Yeah.
So,
So good.
That's so.
I wish I'd known that.
Yeah.
There you go. Golf clap, anybody? Oh, thank you. I know you're done. Okay, speaking of insecurity. Don't draw it out, brothers.
I'm waiting for an amen.
Okay, amen.
That was a dream in my heart.
Oh, thank you.
So love that, and I think even now something we could all battle with is that on Sunday afternoon we're rarely thinking about all the things that went well that
Right.
Sunday. You know, we're rarely thinking, or Monday morning we don't get up and go, man, I just killed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like everything was going well, everything was going good. We think of everything
Yep.
that we said that we shouldn't have said, how we could have hammered that point home. You know, how the serve teams were just a little bit off, or the production wasn't what it could have been. And so, I mean, I think we fight that all the time of not celebrating what was right and only seeing what's wrong. And
So good.
so allowing ourselves grace for our character flaws and our leadership flaws.
Yes, absolutely.
I think sometimes we can get over our character weaknesses. We understand all sinned and fallen short. And
Yeah.
we understand those things. So whenever we don't forgive ourselves for leadership weaknesses, and I think it's for what Pastor John mentioned earlier,
Yes.
is that on social media, everyone
Yes.
else is killing it. Like everyone else doesn't make mistakes. Everyone else is.
Nobody Instagrams their weak spots.
Yeah, that's right. So, you know what? Can I say something else? I think we all know that it's okay for us to have weaknesses. But I thought when you said that, it was so. I don't think we're allowed to have leadership weaknesses.
Sure.
Right.
Because we're
That's
leading
so
people.
good.
Right.
And yet, when you look at, I love at the end of Jesus' temptation, it says, and he was hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. And there's something else that stands out to me is that when you think about Jesus, he had one job, and that was to die on a cross. And yet he could not carry his own cross.
Wow.
There was a
So
moment that he fell over,
Mm.
and someone had to pick his cross up and carry it.
Wow.
And you know there's a part of it, you got one job. And you can't do it.
That's so
And
good.
I really believe he did that on purpose.
Wow. Absolutely.
So we would look and go, okay, there was a moment that
Absolutely.
there was a burden that even God couldn't carry.
Absolutely.
And that it's okay. I literally apologized to a lady on one of our leaders on the front row Sunday. Because I said something in a text message, a group text, and the Lord convicted me of it. And so on Sunday, when I saw her, I walked right to her and said, I need to ask your forgiveness. I said something that I shouldn't have said about a situation, and I need to deal with that situation before I say something about it. So will you forgive me?
Yeah, it's so
And
good.
afterwards, she and her husband came and said, that taught us so much.
Right,
Just from,
right.
you apologize for making
Yes.
a mistake.
And then here's the deal. What I learned is that when I do that, when those same things,
Yeah.
because it's the same for me, is I was drawn to that in other leaders. I'm like, I'm so thankful you're vulnerable and honest and open. It grew me as a leader.
Absolutely.
I was like, okay, it's a relief, you know?
So I think you said something that's important, that as you looked into other leaders, you know, there's a verse of scripture that just says 2 are better than 1,
Yeah.
and 3 strands of rope cannot be broken. And a lot of times we put ourselves in people that are leaders that are healthy, that are pouring into us as we're pouring into people.
Yeah.
We can allow ourselves. That's why this network is so great.
Yes.
That we're around people that can be themselves, but also be able to help us walk through some of those and make those weaknesses actually leadership strengths.
So good.
I found when I was being too harsh on people, and I found out that was because I was so hard on myself.
Oh, that's so true.
Yeah, and like as a leader, I was really kind of heavy on people, and I wasn't giving them grace. And I realized it's because my own inner voice is so hard on myself.
Yeah.
And if I didn't learn how to lighten up and kind of laugh at myself and just take it easy a little bit, that I was never going to treat the people I lead with grace, because it just comes out of that own inner voice that you're talking to yourself all the time, beating yourself down. It's been a big struggle in my life. And just trying to learn how to lighten up and laugh at myself, it helps me give people grace when they make mistakes.
Yeah, I think the greatest tool for me is the way I had to overcome it was good communication
Yeah.
to myself
Right.
and to others.
Mhm.
Had to have healthy conversations. Because I saw it modeled. The example was you don't talk about it, you just
Right.
ignore it. Again, things would get awkward. It's just like, oh my gosh.
Right.
So it challenged me to learn how to communicate again with myself, talk to some self-talk,
Right.
you know, like have some grace for myself as well as for other people. Communicate, talk to them about it. And then they realize, okay, this is a safe place. I can have weakness. I don't have to be perfect to still be a leader on the team.
And then like John said, there was somebody that had to pick up the cross for Jesus. If you don't know your weaknesses, you don't know who to put on your team around you to help you be effective as a
That's
leader.
right.
Come on.
I think we have to talk about the unrealistic expectations
Yeah.
on leaders today. Like we're
So
expected to be, to be able to preach, incredibly. We're supposed to know everything about production. Yeah, know everything about production, know everything about pastoral care, know everything about
Right.
systems, know everything
Yeah.
about structure. Because there's so much pressure on us that none of us are good at all those things,
Right.
or at least I know I'm not good at all those things. So
Yeah.
it's reinforced consistently that there's something wrong, that we're
Yeah.
not good
Yes.
enough, that we're not,
Yeah.
that we need to be better, we need to be,
So
and so, yeah, thank you for sharing that.
That's awesome.
That's great, it's so good. So Pastor Jason, let's go ahead and move on to you.
My name's Jason. I'm married to Heidi, just an amazing wife and mom. She's incredible. I have 2 children, Mackenzie, who's 12, and Jaden, who's 8. And we lead Coast Life Church, which is a replant or a relaunch. So we'll turn 8 years old this year. And just thinking about some of the things I wish I would have known then that I know now. Just 2. One is pick better friends and relationships.
hope we make the
The second is something like it led to one of the worst seasons of my life. And that was, I wish I would have known that there's a difference between an opportunity and a calling.
Ooh, man.
Because I remember a day where God just really invested a vision into my heart. Like I saw it so clearly of the church that I knew God had called me to build, and it was there. But what I didn't realize was how much in the future it was. And because I didn't know that there was a calling for a specific place, I was literally arrogant enough to think that I could just go anywhere and do what God gave me the vision to do.
So good.
And so I chased an opportunity that I shouldn't have chased, and it put me in a season where it was just so rough for us. And I literally thought that, that I could just go somewhere, and I call it this way, like it's good to have a vision of where you want to go, but if you don't have a strong sense of where God is calling you to be, calling and values about who you are and what you're going to do, vision without values causes you to be opportunistic. You chase opportunities. And when you look at the life of Elijah, God told him to go and choose Elisha to be his successor. Elijah comes, and I love what he does is he throws the mantle over him and calls him to the ministry of serving Elijah. And the Bible says, I think it was I can't remember the years, like 12 years, Elisha just poured water on the hands of Elijah. Just for more than a decade, he's just in a serving capacity. And then Elijah says, what do you want me to do for you? And Elisha says, I want a double portion. I have a vision of doing what you've done at an incredibly significant level. And then as Elijah's ministry begins to wrap up, Elijah starts telling Elisha, he's like, hey, you can go now. And Elisha says, I'm not leaving. I'm not going to go. I'm going to stay with you. And Elijah is literally trying to send him away. And he's like, no, my calling is you. I'm not after a mantle. I'm after my calling. And then when God took Elijah, it was the mantle that fell into Elisha's life. And I think for so many leaders, we have a call and we get a vision and we want to do big things and we run after stuff. And if somebody gives us an opportunity, we go after it because we're chasing something big and not realizing that if you want a mantle, a lot of times that comes from staying planted in the place of your calling. Of being patient with what God is wanting to do in your life. That God isn't calling you to do big things. God's calling you to be planted in a place, to be planted in a calling. And as you get planted in that place, God does big things through you. Like it will literally fall in your lap. And I just wish I could have avoided a lot of heartache just by trying to rush the timing of God, by just chasing after opportunities because it was more about my ambition and what I wanted to do, and just staying faithful and just knowing, like literally what God has ultimately done in my life. It wasn't the door I opened, it was the door God opened. And just settling that I don't want what I can chase after. I want what God brings into my life. And I really believe that people who learn to stay planted, who learn just the value of being called to a place, called to a church, called to a community. Like this is the place of God's planting. Psalm 92. I'm gonna plant myself here and I'm gonna thrive and flourish in God's calling. And then just seeing God do amazingly significant things in our life because we're walking in the place of our calling.
Amen.
Come on.
So good.
Yeah.
Amen.
Amen.
So good.
Very good, really.
You guys want to jump in here?
So good.
No.
I mean, I can say a lot, but I
Speechless.
talk so much.
No, I think it is good.
Yeah.
Honestly. I think it's good because I was taught, or even the drive, my personal drive was just like, I'm an opportunist by nature. Like, see a good opportunity, see a need, feel the need, we're taught, like, be a problem, go after it, And sometimes I've chased things in the name of God.
Right.
And I look back and I'm like, sorry, God, I gave you credit for that. That was all me, it was all me. Yeah, you got it. Yeah, it was all me. Because, I think, because again, to quote Paul, I'm striving, I'm straining towards the mark. So there's a part of leadership, even for me, that was a little bit like just going after that straining part. That there's a grace for a place. There's a call. You're called to a place, and there's nothing like being in that grace of your calling. And there's nothing like being out of it.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think there's a difference in being driven and being drawn too. Like you can be driven by something that a past hurt. I'm gonna prove that to them. It's that drive.
Right.
But when you're drawn, that's a calling that's out there, drawing you
So good,
toward it. And you think about how David was, the prophet shows up at Jesse's house, and David didn't even go because his season was to be tending the sheep. They had to go call him and bring him to that place. And I think an opportunistic David would have said, "Oh, prophet's here, I'm going." But he stayed where he was, and so I think that's so good.
And when Jesus called the disciples, they're out fishing, collecting taxes. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing in that season, and they find their calling finds them. They don't find their calling.
That's right.
I think one thing is that, Jason, you're talking about the story of Elisha and Elijah. And it's so awesome that he found himself in a place where he was serving in that moment. While he was waiting and while he's been planted, he was serving and honoring the leadership that was over there at that time. And I think that's one of another great lesson that through that I learned under Dr. Brassfield was how to serve and honor in that position when you're saying, God, what do you want to do in my life? And sometimes the best revelations come when we serve right in the now and serve and honor that leader that's right there with us.
That's awesome, man. Good.
And I would add one thing. It's really to give some context. What Pastor Jason is saying is so powerful because right now he's in a great season. You're having a fourth service at Coast Life, and you guys are you went from 20 to about
20,000.
weekly attendance.
About 750.
2750 in a relatively short period of time. So you're in this awesome season. What people don't see are those years of frustration waiting for the opportunity to come. So it's easy to see how God's blessing your life now, and man, I wish that I could experience that. But we don't see those years that were behind the scenes.
It was 10 years from the moment
Wow.
that God gave me the vision until I actually saw it. And I think that's just the season and the process and learning just to pour water on the hands of somebody else and just say, I'm not leaving. Like Elisha just would not let it go. He stayed with Elijah
So good, man.
so that mantle fell on him.
Great, man.
So true.
Awesome. Good job. All right, good night.
Clap it out. Clap it out.
So before we turn it over to Pastor Ryan Lowe, I want to say go ahead and send your questions in. Let's just to be honest with you, you'll very rarely get a chance to get direct feedback from such we've been joking around a lot tonight, but these panel are all mighty men of God, all spiritual giants, all people that can really speak into your life and pour into you. So don't miss this opportunity to ask some questions. Pastor Ryan, why don't you go ahead?
Well, I'm Ryan. I'm married to Lindsay. A lot of people know her as the hat lady because she always wears a hat. We have 2 kids that are 5 and 4, and we serve at Christ Church in West Monroe as some of the pastors there. I've been on staff there for 12 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, long time. My dad is the senior leader there, so I've just had a great example just coming up through ministry of what it looks like to have true character and integrity in ministry. And so it's been an honor for me just to serve my dad in the house there and the vision there. But, for me to answer that question, I think every season I would have had a different answer. So for my answer today, it's different than it would have been in the last season of my life.
Right.
But right now, I guess my answer would be to set healthy boundaries in your life.
Wow.
Great.
So good.
I'm kind of in the creative world at our church, and I always seem to excel when there are clear boundaries for me to work inside of.
Right.
And so when I have boundaries, I seem to always do my best, and I strive to be the best that I am. And I mean, even you think about our yards and property lines, everything has boundaries. Your body has boundaries. The skin. I think that's where it comes from the old saying, they're getting under my skin. Like you're breaking a boundary there. And so I found that even with the new roles that I'm walking in now as the leader in the leadership of our church, that I have to set healthy boundaries, not just for me personally, but for my family. And when I set those boundaries, that I'm able to be the best version of myself. And with those boundaries comes this idea that I think it was Lisa Turquoise. How do you say her?
Yeah, that's it.
Like you're able to say yes to the best, or give the best yes. That kind of mentality.
Yeah, that's a good.
Because you want to be all things to all people, and when you see a need, when you see someone hurting, you want to jump out there and help. But sometimes there needs some boundaries just so that you can be who you need to be for the people that you're leading right in front of you. So healthy boundaries has been a huge thing for me in this season of my life.
That's awesome.
The word boundary in itself, my wife and I we're just kind of writing out some thoughts for our lives recently about that. And here's something that when you said that, it hit me too, is that boundaries we think it boxes us in.
Right.
We can't be ourselves. We can't let it. But what I found is boundaries bring freedom.
Yeah.
It's
so
like,
good.
oh, you're going to put guardrails on the road here? Okay, so I can have everything in between those? It's like so I can just run free right here. You're saying I'll be safe right here, right? It brings freedom and it brings safety in our life. It's like, okay, so it's guardrails. Someone's looking out for me. you know? And then I learned as a leader, like, okay, the best thing I can do for those I'm leading is to give them some boundaries, let them know. Like, 'cause to me, that's where you develop your leadership. Yes, that's where you learn. It's the safe place to develop and make some
That's so
mistakes
good.
and to be imperfect, you know? So,
Good, yeah. I was looking at this passage in Exodus chapter 23 where God is giving the children of Israel the promise that they're going into the land. And he says, and I will set your borders from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean, and then from the wilderness to the Euphrates, I think. I was trying to find it and couldn't. But anyways, there's these specific borders. So
Right.
even the promised land that God is going to hand them,
Yeah.
he says you can't have it all.
Yeah, that's
Still
right.
going to, your promised land will still have some boundaries because you couldn't control it all.
so good.
So that's always God's way of working is to set boundaries of where we're graced, and there's always something else that needs to be done in ministry.
Always.
Right now,
So great.
there's something else that we could be doing that would be valuable, that'd be worth our time,
Yeah.
that'd be adding value to something. But if you allow yourself to always do what you need to do or think you need to do, you'll never
Gosh,
stop.
So good.
Boundaries create margin, and if you don't establish margin, then you're living on the edge all of the time, and
Yeah.
it's just a really unhealthy place to be in. And you got to establish something that gives you a little margin in life, and it's amazing what God kind of does. I mean, that was the Sabbath essentially.
Right.
Was like put something there, and then watch what I can do if you'll just put that day of margin.
Right.
Dr. Brassfield, I've heard him say many times that miracles happen in the margin.
Right.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
And you think about the Ezekiel River that's flowing from the temple to the Dead Sea, and it says that along the banks is where the trees sprouted.
Right.
On those
Wow.
boundaries is where the trees and the fruit and the leaves sprouted.
So
It wasn't in the river, which is where we think it's happening. It's
Yeah.
actually in those boundaries.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was a good one. Yeah. Y'all clapping home, come on.
Let me hear you roar.
So
I quoted Dr. Brassfield, that should be a.
That's good. That's right.
Amen.
That's why I was clapping.
Hey, you know, this is, I don't want to, but Jared is also a licensed therapist and counselor. What would you say about boundaries? What would you say to people that may be struggling with that right now?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is that it's not restriction, it leads to action. It does lead to action. But I think as ministers or people that are pursuing to help other people in ministry, there's two things that come to mind. The first thing is it leads us into priorities first. So for us is to show a great example of what it means to live life with God, our spouse,
Yeah.
kids,
Right.
and then
So-
ministry
So
and
good.
things of that nature. I mean, that is, if we can, I mean, 1 Timothy it talks about, I think it's chapter 3, if we are not covering our house or we're not being a good steward of our house, how are we going to be able to minister to others? Right? And then the second thing is that you as a person, you're pouring yourself into people. And sometimes you really can get too close. And what I mean by that is that sometimes men, you can put a lot of that weight on your shoulders a lot of times where you're taking all of that in on yourself. And so that's why it's really good to have some healthy habits and I can get in accounts and stuff all the time, but to get into healthy habits with forming those boundaries, such as the right people in place, your priorities in place, but you have people speaking in.
That's right.
You have some things that are healthy, getting rest, extracurricular activities, getting out of the office, doing some things for you that allows you to be able to breathe a little bit. Because when we are healthy and we have our priorities in order and we are healthy, that's when we're the best version of ourselves. That's when we're able to be effective and be able to see that take place.
So good.
Yeah,
Very good.
that's awesome. Hey, so let's get to even a little more to the nitty gritty, more practical. So what area? So obviously you mentioned our family life. So how? And we all have a different answer to this. Maybe just one person take this, but how do you structure your weekly schedule to create boundaries where you have time to spend with your family? Is there a certain day a week that you always take off? Is there, what are some practical ways?
Yeah, it's learning how to handle the calendar. I mean,
Right.
honestly, it was just in the early days, just a lack of discipline on my part. But yeah, I take Mondays. Mondays are Monday Fun Day for me and my wife. And so that's time for me
Hey.
and Heidi. We go to a coffee shop or we go hang out and do something fun. Tuesday is office day. I stay there as long as I need to stay. Like I'm going to knock out as much as I can knock out. Wednesday is study day. Thursday's meetings. Friday morning is meetings, and then Friday afternoon there's a little space of time for just old Jason. And I like playing golf, so that's my golf time. And then of course the weekend rolls around and it's church. But the biggest like shift where for longevity was to not just assume that I was going to take a day or some space, but to set a day like this is my day off. My team knows it's my day off, so they're not texting asking stuff on Monday morning. Like they really honor that. And just knowing like, man, if I can make it to that day, like pressure's off. I'm gonna forget the phone doesn't matter that day. Like we're just gonna have a good time. But like it really establishes some boundaries in your life.
Right, and I'll jump in and say, I love how you said then on Tuesday you stay in as long as it takes to get things done, because part of the tension is that we don't work hard when we should be working.
That's what I tell people.
And so then it just spills out where we never have time off because we're not being
Sabbath is hard work
right.
because you have to make your productive hours productive so that you can take the day off.
So true, man.
And I was so sloppy with my time until I tried to take a Sabbath and I had procrastinated so much important stuff that I wouldn't be able to take a day off.
Right.
And like learning to say that day is going to be my day off.
So good, man.
It shifts all my priorities because now I know what I have to get taken care of so that
So
day can be a true Sabbath.
So
Hey Landon, Carrie Newhoff talks about don't strive for balance, but maximize your passions. So when you're home, you are passionate 100% about being home, right? Like you're there in the here and now. And when you are in ministry or you are in your workplace and being a kingdom focused leader or whatever it may be, you are 100% passionate about being right there in that moment.
Yeah.
You know, a side note to that is that one thing I tell a lot of our families is quality trumps quantity. Just because you have time or you're there, you may not be there.
Right.
And so quality of time, the time invested into that, you know, just when you talk about that Monday, like just that quality of time that's invested, man, that's just so important, especially with our families.
So good.
With Lindsay and I, we're both on full-time staff at the church, and so one of the boundaries that we set was that on our day off, we're not gonna talk church.
Yeah.
We're not gonna talk, it's just gonna be us, we're gonna do what we wanna do. And we have two small kids, like I said, 5 and 4, and a lot of people think that just because you have small kids, you can't go and have any fun with your kids. Well, we just plan it and we just go do it.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, we just drag them along. We just bought an RV, and so we just take them camping.
Oh yeah.
We get out in the middle of the woods, they can scream and run as much as they want. We don't plan and just plan some fun stuff.
That's great.
So good.
Love.
Yes.
Because I'm like anybody else, I just sit on the couch and just veg out all the time.
Yeah.
And so, but this is something that we want to do. That does. So we plan it.
It's good.
Wonderful.
Good balance.
Awesome. Thank you guys for that. We have another question that came in. I want to circle back around now. And I think it refers to something that Pastor Jason said earlier. But what's the best way to stay in God's timing? So is there anything else that we could elaborate for that, for that ability to know that God's called you to do something, know that God's put a vision in your heart, but not sure what the timing is? We've all been there before, right? Where we know that where we are is not where we're going. And what's the best way to not get ahead of God or behind God?
I think David, the power of David was that he had the ability to submit to his seasons.
Wow.
And so when he was a shepherd, They had to call him up. And then his dad commands him to go to the battlefield. Saul tries to put armor on him, and he says, I'm not ready for that yet.
Wow.
I'm a shepherd. I got a sling. And you see him always submitted to the season he's in. And then every time when the giant falls and it's not a sling anymore, he takes the giant sword. Every time the only time he gets in trouble is when, instead of acting like a king, he sees Bathsheba and he acts like a warrior and goes take what he wants to take.
Wow.
And he reverts back to a season that wasn't right for him. For me, my wife and I both have been in those seasons of frustration.
Right.
Where we felt like, man, we know we're called to do this, but there wasn't that release.
Yeah.
Than that, and there is a Colossians says that the peace of God rule in your heart,
Right.
and that means like a judge that says yes or no. And I think there's something to have in that peace that goes, all right, now's the time. I also think it's about being with people. The two men in this room that are off camera right now, Dr. Brassfield and Tom Lowe. I'll never forget Kristen and I sitting in Pastor Tom's office with Trina and with Kathy. And them looking at us saying, it's time for you to do what God's called you to do.
So
I think there's a lot to it, is you need to have leaders in your life that will look at you and go, okay, it's time.
Right.
And, but because I was,
It's not time. Yeah.
or it's not time,
Yeah.
either way. And some of you may be under a leader right now that you think may not see that in you. And you're afraid you're going to miss that out. You're going to miss that moment. You got to remember that God's bigger than all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God knows when your season's coming. So I would encourage you to submit to that season and let him call you when the time is right.
It is delicate because on one hand, you don't want to rush the timing of God.
Right.
And then on the other hand, you're never going to feel fully qualified and prepared to do what God's calling you to do. That there's always that.
That's true.
I think it's Ecclesiastes is don't wait for perfect conditions because they're never going to come. And I think when you're looking at opportunity, one of the big things is knowing whether or not just is there an opportunity, but have you been processed by God to where you're in a place with your character
Amen.
and with knowing who you
Yeah.
are, that you're ready to step into that. And I
Oh
think
my
that's
God.
where having outside eyes saying, you know what, you're at a place now, like you can handle this
Yeah.
opportunity, and having leadership in your life where they can, instead of you going, you can be sent, you can be released into something.
I remember having a conversation one time, late in a hotel room one night, after a conference or something. We were talking about some things of God, things I felt in my heart from God. John, I just don't want to miss him. I don't want to miss God. And John just grabbed my arm and he said, well, then you're not going to. Wow, that was so profound, And over the next few years, I walked that out of my life, realizing that Jesus is a rewarder.
Amen.
He is a rewarder
That's
of
so
those who
good.
diligently seek
Wow.
Him.
Yeah.
You
That's
seek
the
the
word
will.
right
He's
there.
not trying to trick you.
Yeah.
If you trust Him, He's not going to trick you.
Right.
He's
That's
going to
right.
reward you. And you
Right.
seeking the will of
That's
God.
right.
At some point, I've stumbled into more God moments, just
Yeah.
trusting Him,
Just trust.
seeking Him, and realized I'm here. This is what I was praying.
Amazing.
This is what I was praying for, and I was in the middle of it all of a sudden. And
Right.
just you got to trust that He's going to be the reward.
That was worth the whole night.
Come on, man.
Yeah, but I also think about naming, like the process was to dip 7 times in the Jordan River. But what if Naaman would have said, well, I think 5 times is sufficient.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
6 times, because there is literally nothing that changed until
Yeah.
the 7th time, or the children of Israel watching them like march on the wall of Jericho. Like,
Right.
what if they'd have stopped at the 6th time around on day 6? Like
Yes.
the walls didn't fall until they completed the process.
That's right.
And so we have to trust the process, even though the timing, and we can't stop short.
Yeah.
And I love what you're saying, Pastor Ryan.
So
Thank you.
good.
Good stuff.
Awesome.
Um,
Any more questions?
You know what? Let me say one more thing. I felt Ecclesiastes. I misquoted it for years. I would always say that there's a purpose for every time under heaven, but it actually says there is a time for every purpose
Wow.
under heaven, which means there's a purpose that's so important that God devotes a whole season to it.
Right.
Yeah.
And if we rush that season, then the purpose isn't fulfilled. And that's why Israel wanders in the wilderness for 40 years, because they didn't allow that purpose of God to be fulfilled. And
So
Jesus could have gotten out just by bowing or doing one of the things that Satan asked him to do.
right.
He could have circumvented that,
Yeah.
taken off, but instead he submitted to that season. And that purpose is what's important. It's like what you said, Jason, is your character going to be strong enough when you're in that season that you're wanting so bad?
Mhm.
And submitting to the one you're in now is what allows that to happen.
That's so good.
And in many ways, I see DLI as a process that you must submit to in order to get to the next place.
Great transition. Great transition.
Yes.
Right. I mean, it's like, okay, God, I want you to use me. I want you to call me. And if you're not disciplined enough to finish a 2-year program, then
It's true.
We're in every season that you're in, that God trusts you with, that they're submitting to the processes, and when you're faithful in the little things, then God will see that you be faithful in the big things. So let's finish up this way. There's one random question that we kind of get just a quick one person to respond to, and that is any tips for helping people seeing the necessity of volunteering, or buying into the ministry. If you're in a ministry situation or context where you're having a hard time getting volunteers to buy in, what's the 60-second nugget of wisdom we can give them? Pastor Brian.
Well, I mean, again, if we're disciples of Jesus, we're Christians, we're Christ-like, then we've got to follow his example. And he himself said, I didn't come to be served, but to serve.
Yeah.
Right.
Jesus was not always just trying to get them what he wanted them to have. He was trying to get them what they needed too. Sometimes my wife and I were just talking about this past week, where he was feeding the 5,000, and he'd been teaching. All of a sudden he says, wait, they're hungry. We got to feed them, right? So it's like he was even teaching his disciples in that moment. They're like, no, they're good. They can take. It's like, no, we got to make sure we meet their needs, right? And so sometimes in church, we're too busy trying to get them what we want them to have, that we don't stop and think, what does they need? What do we need to give them to make this experience great, right?
Right.
So yeah. So that's sort of the heart of, in my opinion, that's sort of the heart behind it.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And here's how I want to conclude. If each of you will take, in conclusion, tell us a little bit, start with you, Pastor John. Tell us what you are reading right now. If you're not reading anything, what you're listening to. If you're not listening to anything, what are you coloring? What are you reading? What are you listening to? And let us know how we can find your podcast from your church, and then we'll just come down the line that way.
I'm reading Watchman Nee all over again.
Wonderful.
So I'm just going through all of his books and just working through them and just highlighting and underlining and underlining and highlighting and underlining. And again, that's Dr. Brassfield in my heart. And at this point, as far as listening, it's a lot of worship now. Not as much podcast as it is worship. I do have those guys that I go to and listen to periodically, but it's worship. And we are at thehillsnashville.com. That's our website. And the Hills Inville, The Hills NVILLE is our social media.
Perfect. You're a great follow on social media too, so be sure to follow them.
At John Ranks.
At John Rags.
Yeah. Pastor Jared?
Well, naturally, I'm reading Kingdom Focus Leader and Ministry Nuts and Bolts. For all my last students that are out there. What I just finished is one word that'll change your life. And talk about focus on one thing instead of doing nothing about everything. And so we've did that. Me and my wife really asked for a God word and not a good word, and then being able to do that for our family. So that's been a pretty awesome book and a practice for us. Carey Nieuwhof is a big podcast favorite of mine. Jim Brown he's a Christian psychologist, which I really like that too, and marriage and family guy. And churchofcrossroads.com is where you can watch us, but it's watching us live. And so if you're in a church, you don't need to be watching, you need to be serving in your church.
It's like it. I am probably what feeds me the most these days is Craig Rochelle's podcast, the leadership podcast. Is great, it's practical. Information on leading yourself, leading your team, growing a church. It feeds me right now. So we listen to that. My wife and I listen to that regularly. I read more blogs. I do books probably, and probably a couple of blogs that I love reading lately. Probably is on a practical, just self-management is Michael Hyatt. I love his stuff. It just good stuff. It meets me where I am.
Yeah.
And then, believe it or not, T.D. Jakes. Come on now. The bishop recently, man, there's been some good things. He's met me where I am right now. So the bishop, and then so that's reading and listening.
Yeah. They can find you online.
Find me online at larsonministries.com. Larsonministries.com. Meet you there. No, that sounds like a good title. No, larsonministries.com where you can find us.
All right, wonderful. And then as far as what I'm reading right now, I just finished Prayer, Experiencing Awe and Intimacy by Tim Keller. Great book on the biblical foundations of prayer and some practical tips that I found really helpful. And The World of the New Testament by Moyer Hubbard, which goes into the religious, social, political, cultural backgrounds of the New Testament in a very, very readable way. If you want to know more about that topic, recommend it. He starts every chapter with like it's almost like a novel of a character living in the first century to give us more insight into how they actually lived. It's a great resource, and you can find my sermons and podcast on the Grace Houston app. If you Google in the App Store or Grace.1, go to the Tomball campus, and you'll find all my stuff there.
I really am reading everything Landon's reading. I really am. Yeah, we're all doing
Goals.
that.
I just
We left
have
that part off.
I just have him read it to me.
Yeah, that's right.
Pastor Jason?
I am reading Forces That Form Your Future by Kevin Gerald, a great book. And then I just finished one you recommended a long time ago, Surprised by Hope by N.T. Wright,
Great book.
which is an incredible book if you ever just want to get fired up about wanting to build the church. It just leaves you with that inspiration to go do something significant. A lot of the podcasts that have been mentioned are Carey Nieuwhof and Craig Rochelle, and throw Andy Stanley's podcast, leadership podcast, in there as well. It's something that I'll listen to. I've done a bunch of preaching. I just like to be preached to sometimes.
That's right.
And so, yeah. And then you can find the Coast Life Church app on the App Store. Go to Coast Life TV on the Coast Life app. You can check out the messages there. You can go to mycoastlifechurch.com and Jason L. Warman on social media.
Awesome. Pastor Ryan?
I'm just transitioned into a new season in our church, and so I'm all about leadership right now. And so I'm actually paying to go through a class and being taught Leadership Goal by John Maxwell. So I'm going through that book, and also Axiom by Bill Hybels.
That's a great book.
Just a lot of incredible nuggets in that book for just a guy like me that's just kind of finding his way in leadership. But man, all these guys on this panel right here, they all speak into my life on a daily basis. Like Brian said, it is truly iron sharpening iron,
Right.
making me better, making me a better version of myself. And so some of the podcasts that I listen to, my teaching style or my speaking style is very teachy. So, but I like to listen to preaching.
Come on.
So I'm all into TD Jakes, man. I listen to that Joker every time I go to the office. But you can find us online at christchurch.la, and it's on the app stores and social media and all that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Students, thank you for joining us and for spending your evening. Hope you learned a lot. This was so much insight. I think in conclusion, I would just say this should be an encouragement that if you have not yet, to find your tribe, to find a group of people that you can glean from and learn from. My life is so much better because of all these guys here. And we joke around a lot, but really, I love them all, and all of them have been there for me in good times and bad times, and could not imagine where I'd be if it wasn't for these guys that are sitting up here with me. And so thankful for my Destiny family, and would encourage you that if you haven't yet, find your tribe, find your guys. Any concluding thoughts? Any concluding words?
Go DLI!
Go do your
All
love.
right.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thank you guys. We'll see you next time.